Greetings! The world of Neopia is a land rich with magic and adventure, and at its heart are the species that make up its population. In this series, we'll be looking into the lore, the history, and the characters that make up some of those species, starting with the Gelert.
Gellerts.
Our story begins on the 25th of January 2000, just approximately 2 months after the site first launched. In November of 1999, a new species was introduced to Neopia. Was it the Gelert? Not quite, but close. It was the polypup. Originally, this OG Gelert had a slightly different design than the one we know today. Most notably, the 2 nostrils on the end of its snout as opposed to the Gelert's puppy dog nose. They were also described as spiky, having a more rigid and angular design compared to the fluid, flowing, whip-like ears and tail that have come to define Gelerts. It was later that same year, on the 19th of July 2000, that the polypup was originally changed to the Gelert. However, on the 2nd of November 2001, the Neopets team announced that they wanted the Gelert's design to be updated to be more in line with some of the other pets, and they launched a poll allowing users to vote on the Gelert's new look. There were 5 designs to choose from, and a week later, Gelert number 3 was tentatively pronounced the winner. However, that wasn't the end of it. The design wasn't immediately updated, and throughout the month, TNT would post a series of updates assuring users that they were indeed still working on it and that the new design would be released soon. Finally, on the 29th, the official winner was announced and the new design was revealed. However, it wasn't number 3 who took the crown. It was a combination of numbers 2 and 5, which interestingly I think ended up looking the most like number 1 in terms of the final design, which probably would have been the one I would have voted for if I had had my account at that time. This version of the Gelert would endure until the surprise site conversion of April 2007, when all the pet art was updated to allow customization. Most any official descriptions of Gelerts will include words like loyal, faithful, and heroic to characterize their nature. It's said that if you befriend a Gelert, you'll have a faithful companion until the end. Those core characteristics seem to be tethered to the Gelert's very identity as a species, as they're even reflected in their namesake. The default Gelert pet pages note how they were named after a famous hero who died for their owner. This is in reference to the legend of Prince Llewellyn and his faithful hound Gelert. There was actually a page dedicated to the story on Neopets at one point, but it has long since been removed. Since, as far as I've been able to find, there is no archival record of that page, I will relay the story to you as it is written on Gelert's grave. In the 13th century, Llewellyn, Prince of North Wales, had a palace at Beth Gelert. One day he went hunting with old Gelert, the faithful hound, who was unaccountably absent. On Llewellyn's return, the truant, stained and smeared with blood, joyfully sprang to meet his master. The prince, alarmed, hastened to find his son, and saw the infant's cot empty. The bedclothes and floor were covered in blood. The frantic father plunged his sword into the hound's side, thinking it had killed his heir. The dog's dying yell was answered by a child's cry. Llewellyn searched and discovered his boy unharmed, but nearby lay the body of a mighty wolf which Gelert had slain. The prince, filled with remorse, is said to have never smiled again. he buried Gelert here. It would be nice to see exactly how the Neopets page recounted this story, as it's been told many different times by many different people throughout different eras of history, each with their own embellishments. Some say that Gelert licked his master's hand before he died, or wagged his tail one final time. This legend is actually a common motif in folklore, and has many different versions from many different countries and cultures. Each uses different animals, but all of them have the same story of a faithful companion who defends a baby, only to be heedlessly killed upon a cursory look at the scene. You may have even seen a version of this story in popular culture if you've ever watched Lady and the Tramp, and you remember the scene where Tramp is sent to the pound after protecting the baby from a rat. A specific mention of friendship was also present in the description of the Polypup, along with a penchant for magic and the ability to be great fighters. Though the old Battle Dome was retired in October 2012, taking with it the species-specific pet ability system, Gelerts used to have a series of unique moves, including Gelert Crescent Kick, Gelert Slobber, Gelert Jump, Gelert Slide, and Gelert Bark. Neopets actually also has a couple other references to Gelert's barking, which is unsurprising considering their canine appearance, but is still interesting to know that they have a specific vocalization associated with them. No matter the context, Gelerts are fundamentally social creatures who value friendship. Though there are some cases where they might fall short of their valiant reputation, they may still be found living in groups with other Neopets. They also seem to be relatively active pets, enjoying games that involve running and chasing. Aside from their heroic reputation, they also carry a slightly less prevalent notoriety for being easily confused. Despite the physical and behavioral traits that define Gelerts, each one is an individual. This next part won't be as heavy on references since it relies a bit more on personal perception, but let's delve into the world of Neopia and take a look at some Gelerts to see how they embody the traits we've discussed. Oh, and I know who you're thinking of, and we will get to him, I promise, but we have other Gelerts to talk about as well. On the Gelerts info page on Neopets, the only notable character they list is a prince whom you can supposedly meet playing Kiss the Mortog. It seems this is supposed to be a reference to Prince Turin Rathbone, who is featured most notably in the Darkest Faerie PlayStation 2 game, where he has an entire series of side quests dedicated to him. To me, he is a lovely example of a Gelert. All his quests revolve around his devotion to his love, Princess Donna. He's also a little scatterbrained and while not exactly the embodiment of courage, he remains faithful through and through, never giving up on his beloved and taking it all in stride with a friendly and grateful demeanor, with the exception of when he was under the Darkest Faerie's influence. There are a few other references to him throughout Neopets where he's known as Gelert Prince, and this seems to be where the Mortog reference comes from. The description of the stamp depicting him reads, Meridel, home of royalty, fine castles, and slimy kissing things. The trading card that depicts him seems to picture him standing by a pond with a swirl of magic in front of him. To me, these context clues seem to lean more towards him being the one who kissed the Mortog, but there's no definitive statement on whether he was the kisser or the kissee outside of that page. He does have a family crypt in the Brightville Cemetery that contains a book of his family heritage and proof of his royal lineage. There are multiple ways one could imagine his story based on the information we've been given. But this one thing for sure is a lie. There is no Gellert prince in the Kiss the Mortog game, unless this is supposed to be Prince Turin before his buckle fat removal. Back to the topic of hand, there is another Gellert in the Darkest Faerie who is quite the opposite, but interestingly also has a significant piece of his story hidden away in the Rathbone family crypts. The Gellert assassin is quite the bad guy, as his name would imply. He's motivated not by loyalty, but by neopoints. He's effectively the opposite of everything we typically associate with Gellerts, but if we look a little closer, it's revealed to us that the one thing that could turn him from the light was the loss of his love. Someone to whom he was so devoted that in losing them he also lost himself, becoming a shadow of the warm and caring person he once was. This contrast between him and Prince Turin is quite interesting in how the game takes two Gellerts and shows us one manifestation of love and loyalty as well as the darkest possible reflection of it. The same beginning, but two very different endings, both reaching a conclusion of sorts in a location the game refers to as the Gellert family crypt. For Turin, it's the final step in his quest to reach his happily ever after with Donna, and for the assassin, it's where we get a glimpse into who he truly was and the happy ending he was bereaved of. I didn't think of the Darkest Faerie as such a Gellert-rich game until I started planning this video, but there's also another significant Gellert in it, in Seradar. He is Brightvale's royal sorcerer, and he does display a significant degree of loyalty and responsibility to his kingdom, but also to Roberta, who he treats with warmth and understanding despite his professional demeanor and the fact that she's supposed to be there as a diplomat, but she really wants to learn magic.
The mission is most important. Your uncle and I have never seen such clouds as those that gather over Meridel. They are dark things and full of power. Our meeting with Queen Theora must go well, and that responsibility falls to you.
Yes, sir. I'll do my best.
You'll do fine, Roberta. And if it helps any, maybe I'll teach you some more complicated spells while we're here.
His affinity for magic is sort of intriguing insofar as that it was something originally associated with polypops, and there is actually another similar sort of Gellert wizard from the Spellseeker game. I don't really have much to say about him outside of his association with magic. I'm not really sure there is much to say, as the only information we're given about him is that we seem to be playing as his apprentice studying spells, and if one of the cursed tiles reaches the bottom, it will wreak havoc on the library or something. Perhaps he does have that confused Gellert gene, because the library really seems like it would be one of the worst places to be practicing these spells. The Gellert assassin also actually uses a lot of magic in the game. And speaking of magic, we have Bruno, another very notable Gellert in Neopian lore, serving as one of the main characters in the Tale of Woe, also known as the Haunted Woods plot. When one considers the process that must go into choosing which species are going to be used to represent different plot characters, I think using a Gellert for Bruno was a wonderfully fitting choice. He starts out as a rather meek and downtrodden character, and when Mr. Crawley offers him a potion that promises to grant him what he most desires, that desire is simply to have a chance with the girl that he has a crush on. Overnight, he takes on the appearance of somebody strong and confident. It's unclear as to whether that confidence was an effect of the potion or simply his reaction to his change in appearance. I would lean heavily towards the latter because the mutation and corruption he's subjected to as things begin to go awry seems to be entirely physical. When the town is gripped by the full effects of the potion, Bruno takes it upon itself to protect his family, giving his little sister a chance to escape to safety and standing his ground against the mob, putting himself on the line for his loved ones, and ultimately being driven from his home. He thought it better to live in exile than to return and risk provoking the townspeople again. He is consistently shown to express that deep-seated protectiveness for the people he cares about throughout the plot, lashing out at Gellerts for leaving Sophie to fend for herself instead of caring for her and doing nothing to help the town, and also jumping to defend Jilly when Sophie lashes out at her. He also doesn't hesitate to volunteer his own body as a vessel for the spirit of slumber. Bruno seems to take things as they come, rejoicing in seeing his family in town safe once more, instead of dwelling on the fact that he's now permanently mutated. It's said that many Neopian legends tell of Gelerts' selfless acts of courage, and I think Bruno fits perfectly among them. There is, however, another very high-profile notable Gelert who would not fit so nicely on that list, or the nice list itself for that matter. He's definitely getting coal in his stocking, but it doesn't really matter because he'll just take whatever he wants anyway. And so we finally arrive at Kanrik, the leader of the Thieves Guild. Neopets really seems to love the lovable rogue archetype. Is Kanrik really a hero, though? He did abandon Hannah to what could have been her death when she was screaming to him for help, and those two would go on to become one of the most popular canon/fanon couples in Neopets. Which there were a lot of red flags there, but I suppose that if Hannah has the leader of the Thieves Guild dancing on her leash, good for her. What I find really interesting about Kanrik being a Gelert is that, like the Gelert assassin, he really subverts the expectations we've come to associate with Gelerts. He is cold and detached, showing no loyalty to Hannah or remorse for cutting her loose after she'd served her usefulness to him, despite the fact that she had already saved him in a similar way when the roles were reversed. Throughout the first half or so of the plot, he is characterized very heavily as a betrayer. He is shrewd and calculating, unrestrained by his ties to others when it comes to pursuing his own desires, essentially the opposite of everything that Gelerts represent. When the tables are turned on him, however, we do see a flicker of warmth, stemming from him being at his most vulnerable. He never really does a full 180, but we are presented with the possibility of his redemption. Him extending his hand is very symbolically relevant, as it reflects a change in his attitude towards those in need, or at least towards her. When he apologizes, however, he does so only for the curse, something he obviously had no control over, rather than letting her fall and abandoning her, essentially wiping his hands of any blame. He also claims he's all alone because the Thieves Guild betrayed him, which I suppose could technically be true if by the Thieves Guild he just means Masilla, but that's really not how I would characterize what happened. He is quite the anti-hero, and while his heart may not have grown 3 sizes like the Grinch, perhaps it grew 1 size, or half a size at least. I think him being a Gellert lends itself well to both his character arc in the plot and what future expectations we have of him and the intrigue surrounding that, in how he might continue to embrace that warmth. There is also the fact that when he first meets Hannah, in order to beseech her to help him find the tomb, he tells her a story about how his sister is dying and he needs her help to find a cure, which is obviously a lie, but one must wonder if there was a hint of truth to it. Considering we know nothing of Kanrik's past, it's possible that he really did at one point have a sister who was sick. Perhaps he initially joined the Thieves' Guild in an attempt to help support her, and when she ultimately died, that was the catalyst for him closing himself off, because he no longer had anyone to fight for aside from himself. He does tell Hannah that she reminds him of his sister, and she is ultimately the one who gives him a reason to care again. That's 100% speculation on my part, though. We don't even know for sure if his sister was real. But on that note of possibility, potential, hope, and redemption, I will leave you with those very same sentiments that I have for Neopets in its 25th year. Happy New Year, everyone. I hope it's one filled with kindness and compassion. This truly does feel like a new era for Neopets, and it's been a new era for me as well. It feels like a lifetime since I've seen the site, this alive and vibrant, and I'm just so grateful for all the wonderful people I've met and had a chance to interact with. Thank you, truly, and I hope this year will be one for dreams to come true.